Welcome to Healthy Buzz, the podcast for women who are craving honest answers in a supportive community. Hosted by Brandy Homerding, a certified nutrition therapy practitioner who believes your body isn't broken, but the narrative around women's health is. Each week, we're diving deep into holistic health topics, challenging the one-size-fits-all approach, and empowering you to trust your own informed intuition. Get ready to feel seen, supported, and seriously informed. This is Healthy Buzz, where collaboration meets unfiltered transparency in women's health. If you have ever dealt with chronic dry eyes, stubborn rosacea, or eczema and felt like you were stuck in a cycle of expensive eye drops and topical creams that never quite really fix the problem, today's episode is going to change how you look at your health. Literally. Today, I am joined by Dr. Christina Gratkowski Haro of Looking Beyond Health. We're going to discuss why your eyes and skin are actually the dashboard to your internal health. We're going to talk about the role of the microbiome, why conventional Band-Aid solutions often fall short, and how your body uses these visible symptoms as a signal that it's time to take a deeper look. Dr. Christina is an optometrist, functional health practitioner, and coach who helps people uncover the root cause of the chronic symptoms affecting their eyes, skin, gut, and overall health. Frustrated by conventional approaches that focus only on symptom management, she pursued advanced training in functional medicine to better understand how inflammation, immune imbalance, and lifestyle factors drive chronic conditions. She is the founder of Looking Beyond Health, where she works with clients to address issues like dry eyes, eczema, rosacea, digestive problems, metabolic dysfunction, and autoimmune concerns using a personalized root cause approach. Her mission is to help people understand what their symptoms are telling them and how to deal with them from the inside out. Welcome to today's show, Christina.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So I'd love to hear how you made that leap from conventional world to the functional world, because your background is in optometry. So you were an eye doctor who realized that, hey, look, there's a bigger piece of the puzzle here. So could you tell us a little bit more about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off, of course, being in the conventional space, treating eye conditions the way that I was taught in school. And one of my favorite examples is when I would have patients coming in with eczema, and because often you'll see it around the eyes. And so I did what I was taught in school, prescribe them the steroids, be like, hey, did you change your laundry detergent? Any the typical things. And they'd be like, no. And then I'd send them on their way. And then of course, people ended up back in my chair. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing what I was taught in school. Why are these people still coming back? And that's one example with the skin and how I kind of got into the skin world. But also we can see inflammation that shows up in the eyes. The eyes is an area that we directly can look at blood vessels. So we'll see metabolic dysfunction, diabetes, high blood pressure, things like that. And all of these things tie back to systemic health. And so I would get frustrated because, I'd have my patients coming in and I would want to talk to them about all of these other things, but you only get 15 minutes with patients and you just really didn't have the tools to dive deeper. So I truthfully got really burnt out and I kept thinking, what is wrong with me? And I figured it's not necessarily me, it was the system. And so I was a nutrition coach first at the time, and I really, knew that connection there. And so thankfully I found functional medicine, went back for training so that now I can actually help people get to the root cause and figure out why they're having these symptoms and then actually do something about it instead of slapping Band-Aids on.
Yeah, I feel like so many people have that personal experience like you did, where they just kind of have like this awakening, this experience of like, hold on, I keep seeing the same people here over and over again. And the things that I'm telling them to do is not really addressing the symptoms. We need to look a little bit deeper. So I love that you've like branched out from this conventional world to really embrace the functional aspect of health and wellness. So when we're thinking, a lot of people understand like there's a big connection between the gut and the skin, but often the eye connection is overlooked and is often, a surprise to people. So why do systemic imbalances like gut dysfunction or chronic inflammation, why are they choosing to show up in the eyes in the first place and like shouting for attention?
Yeah, that's a great question. And People always say to me when they hear about my background, they're like, an eye doctor, what is an eye doctor doing this, and my goal is to get people to understand how deeply the eyes are connected to the rest of the body. The eye, well, really the eyes, the skin, and the gut, they're all considered barrier organs. And people often think about that with the skin and the gut because if you're ingesting, but your eyes are literally being exposed to things also all day long, and they have their own immune system that ties in, though, of course, directly to the rest of our immune system. And they also take in so much, input, not only visually, but just things are constantly being exposed to the eyes. And so people tend to forget that if we're having these issues with our immune system, right? And with the environment, with inflammation is a big piece of the puzzle, but those are directly going to show up in the tissue of your eye. And your eye is also a connection to your brain. People, I think, forget that as well. They just take them for granted as these little organs, and or they like to think of them as a separate organ from the rest of the body. People tend to forget how closely connected they all are. And so that's kind of, I'm on this mission to get people to not only not forget about their eyes, but realize that it's truly connected to the rest of the body as well.
So what are the things that like you are seeing pop up when somebody's with their vision or their eye conditions that you're like, hey, this is making me think of other things happening with your immune system or with your gut or whatever that may be?
Yeah, so one big one is dry eyes, and that's actually something that's really, really common. So a lot of people are suffering with dry eye, and I do want to say a little background about, because when we say the term dry eye, but really it goes deeper than that. Some of the symptoms that you look for with dry eyes are also itching, burning, tearing, redness, fluctuating vision, light sensitivity is another one. So it's not necessarily that they just feel dry. They can be feeling a lot of those other things as well. And many people struggle with this, especially women. It's really common because hormones play a role in dry eyes as well. So we see this quite frequently, and especially in the optometry world, we see people with dry eye. I mean, all day long, people are suffering with it, but they don't make the connection that it can be coming from somewhere deeper in the body. And looking at the diet, like inflammation is a huge piece of the puzzle, hormones, and then also the gut, because of course, what do we know? One of the biggest drivers of systemic inflammation comes from inflammation from the gut. And so in the optometry world, we were very much taught to treat the eyeball and do things only to the eyeball or the eyelids, which are an important piece of the puzzle. But I try to educate people that besides that, you do need to look again beyond the eye and say, well, what's going on systemically that's driving this? And to that, along with dry eye, another condition that we'll see sometimes is, well, there's a few different inflammation or inflammatory things like something called uveitis or episcleritis, where we'll see areas of inflammation that pop up in the eye. And quite often, again, that was one of those things where it's like, okay, your eye's inflamed. Here's some steroids. See you later. But nobody was asking the questions, well, why is your eye inflamed, or where is this inflammation actually stemming from? And quite often it comes from systemic inflammation.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the hormone piece of the puzzle? Because a lot of my listeners are in the like perimenopausal age, or they may be postmenopausal. And so they are dealing with a lot of these hormonal fluctuations. What role is our hormones playing in eye health?
Yeah, that's a great question. And exactly what you just said about those fluctuations is kind of the key. So we have obviously, hormone receptors everywhere in the body, but no surprise, we have them on our eyes and our eyelids as well. And so specifically with women, when we start to see those fluctuations with estrogen, so it's not necessarily, that it's too high estrogen or too low that is contributing to dry eye, but it's actually that fluctuation piece. So that's really why a lot of women, specifically in perimenopause and menopause, will start developing dry eye symptoms, again, besides all the other stuff, but because of those fluctuations. And then also androgens play a role in the oil glands as well. And so when I was talking about kind of like the eyelid anatomy, and I mentioned eyelids earlier, we have little glands that go along the eyelid margin that produce the oil component of our tears. And so then if you see women with, low androgens, that's when you can also potentially experience some dry eye symptoms as well. So definitely plays a big piece and makes sense why we see that quite frequently in that population.
That brings up a really good question for me, because I've heard of this like with different friends and maybe even some clients that I've worked with. When people are dealing with a sty in around on their eyelid, like, is there a hormonal piece? Is there an inflammation? Is there a gut health piece that needs to be uncovered with that too?
Yeah, probably I would say all three, but specifically the inflammation and then the gut, because even though, yes, you're having that kind of localized infection, essentially just for people who are like, what is this dye? But that's where those little meibomian glands I was just talking about can become clogged and inflamed. And that's why you get that little bump. But, there's the eye microbiome that plays a role. But again, we know how much it is also related to the systemic and or gut microbiome as well. So when people are often having, now of course you can treat things locally, like a good old hot compress can go a long way, but when you have people that come and they're like, I'm getting these chronically, no matter what I'm doing, it's not helping, they'll go to an eye doctor and even see potentially there's now advanced treatments that you can do for the eye to help with those. But even then we'll still see people with recurrent ones. And then that's where, again, I come in and I'm like, hey, have we looked at your gut microbiome? Have we looked at your diet, micronutrient deficiencies, things like that. So definitely other areas to explore if you're someone who's still struggling with those and all the conventional things you've tried so far is not working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything that you're chronically dealing with, there's probably an underlying deeper cause than just like what's on the surface. I mean, exactly. Everything's so internal, right? So yep. Speaking of that, like when we're thinking about like the conventional model, as we've talked about often so far in this conversation, is that usually it's going to be a topical thing or maybe a steroid even to systemically like address what's happening in the body. But like we're missing the bigger picture here for people who are chronically suffering with a lot of these issues. And so like the flare-ups of, let's say, even eczema, and the stubborn, like red eye, dry eye. What are some things that you're seeing for even the like gut microbiome that could potentially be contributing to this? Are there anything specific around that?
Yeah, definitely. So big common trends that we see in a lot of the skin conditions are, one, when we're looking at functional stool testing, we tend to see overgrowth of inflammatory pathogens that we, obviously don't want there because they do cause that systemic inflammation. There's, interestingly, with different skin conditions, we'll tend to see certain species that are more elevated, like H. pylori obviously is a huge one that drives a lot of skin issues and also some of the eye issues as well. SIBO is also linked, so that is pretty common. Interestingly, with rosacea, there's a lot of studies on eradicating SIBO and how that helps rosacea, but something that people don't, I think, also realize is there's something called ocular rosacea. And so a lot of times people are just thinking about rosacea on their regular, their skin or their cheeks, but eye doctors will see tiny little vascularization around the eyelid margin that is indicative of ocular rosacea. And ocular rosacea is a big driver of dry eyes as well. Again, kind of like the styes and microbiome. When you're looking at that, if you're testing for things like SIBO or inflammatory pathogens, low beneficial species as well, right? Because if we don't have enough of the beneficials, these are trends that we commonly see when we're digging a little bit deeper to say, well, why are these skin and eye issues happening in the first place?
Can you explain to our listeners a little bit more like what H. pylori and what SIBO are, because they may not be familiar with those terms?
Yeah, absolutely. So H. pylori is a bacteria that tends to overgrow that we'll see in the gut. And one of the biggest things about H. pylori is that when it overgrows, it tends to drive down stomach acid. And so stomach acid, as we know, is well, I shouldn't say as we know, but us in the functional world know.
You and I know.
That,
yep.
Yeah, we know, but not everybody knows that we really need that for digestion. It plays a role in us also killing off the quote unquote bad guys, as I always call them, in the gut, because, we need our stomach to be acidic enough to kill those things off. And so when H. pylori is releasing, inflammatory mediators in the system, but also driving down that stomach acid, that's where you see a lot of these downstream issues occurring. And SIBO is the other one that you said. So that's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And that is where typically we don't want to see a ton of bacteria in our small intestine. And for a number of different reasons, this can get overgrown in that area. And so kind of the typical thing that we'll see with that is people who get a lot of bloating. That's kind of one of like the key things of SIBO, but again, you're getting this buildup of bacteria that's not supposed to be present in the small intestine. And so that can, again, same thing, just cause a lot of these inflammatory and, immune dysregulation drivers throughout the rest of the body.
Yeah. And I see that quite frequently with people who are even nutritional deficiencies. Like if their vitamin D level is really low, it's like, oh, why are we not absorbing our nutrients appropriately? What's going on in your gut? What's inhibiting that? And it can often be linked to not enough stomach acid. I beat the drum all day long about stomach acid, and people probably get really sick of me talking about it, but so important. And if you don't have enough stomach acid, you're more susceptible to have SIBO and an overgrowth of all these opportunistic bacteria that create a lot of inflammation, going to impact your skin, going to impact your eye health. So it's just all super connected. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I think too, I'm sure you see this, that it's the opposite of what people are always thought because of how popular PPIs are. So everyone's like, what do you mean? I thought we need to get rid of the stomach acid. And so there's a lot of education there about, no, it's actually the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Let's expand on that. I would love, because a lot of times people are like, oh, I have a lot of acid reflux or I have heartburn. And so that means I have too much stomach acid. In what way could that actually be false?
Yeah. So essentially there's a little valve that between, the small intestine, or excuse me, the stomach, and then going down to the small intestine, that your stomach needs to be at a specific pH to open that valve so that that process can occur. And so what happens is, if, again, coming from the low stomach acid, which is quite often due to stress or, again, micronutrient deficiencies, if we don't have enough nutrients to even make the stomach acid, but people will be struggling there. And so it doesn't get acidic enough in order to open that valve. And so then food is kind of sitting in there. And then that's when it starts to kind of ferment and, kind of go back up the other way. And that's where you get that kind of acid feeling that people think it's again too much acid, but ironically the problem was that there actually wasn't enough to cause that. But then, because we're concerned about obviously the esophagus, we don't want it to burn from the stomach acid that is there, so hence why PPIs will be used. But really it's quite the opposite, and that tends to make the problem a lot worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I've worked with so many clients who have been on PPIs for a long time, and they're still having acid reflux and heartburn. It's not a high stomach acid issue. It's a low stomach acid issue. And by taking that PPI, you're reducing your acid even more. And so we're going to have even more downstream effects, even more micronutrient deficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
It's setting you up for failure.
Yeah. And it's tough too, because of course, us saying this, I always feel like I have to give that caveat, please don't just go stop your medications without talking to your doctor. Of course, I feel like I always have to say that. However, if you are someone that finds that you need this or have been on it for many years, you do need to start asking those questions. Why do I need this? Is there something that we can do otherwise to try to get to the root of the problem?
Mm-hmm. So we talk about dry eyes a lot. What about watery eyes? Because I know that can be an issue for some people too. What is that pointing people to? And is it really that they have an overproduction of tears, or is it an underproduction of tears?
Yeah, you're correct. It is an underproduction of tears. So typically the eyes water because they're dry. And I say that to people all of the time, but most of the time when they're overwatering like that, it's actually because the eye is, sensing that it's dry. So it'll your lacrimal gland will try to make more tears, but we always say they're not like good quality tears. And most people know they're like that annoying tear that just runs down your face and feels annoying. But really, it's your body's way of trying to help you out. But unfortunately, like with the tear film, there's three components. There's the oil that comes from those meibomian glands we just talked about. There's the water part, and then the whole, like the mucin part. And so we need all three of these to be working together. And so when there's an issue where it's not balanced like that, that's when you can run into problems. If the glands become clogged, if you don't have that good oil component, then tears are just evaporating. I signaled, and then it'll start watering. So it typically, I'll say that to people like, well, you have dry eyes. And they're like, no, I have water eyes. I'm like, well, it's because they're dry.
So is that then just using eye drops to address the dry eye issue? Or is it, again, going back to everything we've talked about for the last 20 minutes about what that's telling you?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I mean, you of course can use eye drops, like artificial tears, to kind of at least temporarily help with symptomatic relief, but that is just kind of the band-aid in the dry eye world. So definitely that's where you want to start looking deeper, and that's when you want to say, okay, well, why is this issue happening? Which again, part of it does come from the glands. Like that is a piece of the puzzle. Fun fact, when we all stare at screens all day long, our blink rate goes down. So they actually studied that, and we don't blink our eyes as we should. And every time we blink our eyes, we squeeze those little oil glands and get a little bit of the oil into our tear film. And so when we're not blinking and we're all just staring at screens, that's when, you'll that oil will start to become stagnant in the gland. And also we want that oil to be like olive oil is the consistency. But what we tend to see is because of, again, everybody eating the standard American diet, they're eating very, high omega-6, low omega-3s, just inflammatory diets in general, we'll actually see the structure of that oil change and become more like toothpaste material. And so it can't get out into your tears. And so that's a big part of the problem there, as far as like looking at the structure of the oil. So there's even things, besides looking at your diet, but even like screen time. People don't even think when you're looking for the root cause, which is very hard because like even here, obviously we need to be on screens for our jobs, but it sounds silly, but I tell people, don't forget to blink your eyes, take breaks, look out the window. It's really good for your eyes in the long run.
Hey, Healthy Buzz community. Have you been curious about using a continuous glucose monitor to unlock powerful insights to your metabolic health? Imagine seeing in real time how your body responds to different meals, different workouts, and also the effects of stress. Now, what if you could experience those benefits without being locked into any type of recurring subscription like some of the other continuous glucose monitor programs out there? With my Blood Sugar Savvy course, you'll get exactly that. You'll receive access to 7 engaging learning modules, 2 continuous glucose monitors to start your wellness journey, plus 4 weekly one-on-one video strategy sessions with me where I'll personally guide you to understanding your CGM data. We'll work together to identify your unique blood sugar patterns and create customized strategies for better energy, mood, and overall well-being. Oh, and by the way, this is especially crucial during your peri- and postmenopausal years. Blood Sugar Savvy is about understanding your body on a deeper level, implementing practical strategies, and gaining sustainable knowledge to support your overall health and wellness. Ready to get Blood Sugar Savvy and take control of your metabolic health? Healthy Buzz listeners can save $30 simply by using the code BUZZ at checkout. Your personalized blood sugar journey starts now. That was a really good descriptor, by the way, of like olive oil, and then it's more like toothpaste. Like, I think that is motivation enough for me to like just look outside every now and then and blink my eyes as a quick reminder. That's going to be playing in my mind over and over again all day long. So that, yeah, that's really insightful and really impactful. So like when we're thinking, I know oftentimes I can think of 2 specific instances in that we're thinking a lot of different eye issues can be like manifested as an underlying disease process. One I'm thinking of is Graves' disease, and the other one I'm thinking of is like blood sugar dysregulation. Can you talk a little bit about those specific issues and how that is then contributing to maybe some eye issues people are experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, Graves' disease, I think a lot of people see the commercials, right? I've had so many patients come in and they're like, do I have thyroid eye disease? Because they see these commercials that are out there, which is good. I'm glad that there's that education piece. But if someone has Graves' disease, it can cause, the big thing that people see is kind of like the protruding of the eyes, but taking that's like the extreme case, but it can actually affect the eye muscles. And no surprise, it also can kind of contribute to dry eyes as well. So we'll definitely see symptoms coming up. And then to that point with then the thyroid, because the thyroid is a big piece of the puzzle in the functional world as well, because it's again not as simple as, oh, you have a thyroid condition, here, just take some thyroid meds and send you on your way. You want to kind of look deeper and be like, oh gosh, if we have this problem that's affecting our eyes stemming from the thyroid, now we need to be looking at even the bigger picture of, okay, well, how can we more holistically look at the thyroid as well? So again, this is kind of makes that bigger picture and bigger map of like eye symptoms that then still go back systemically to the rest of the body. And then same thing with the blood sugar dysregulation. So, I mean, diabetic retinopathy is one of the largest problems or leading causes of blindness in the world. And I mean, I see diabetic retinopathy all of the time. And essentially what that is the little tiny blood vessels that are present in the back of the eye, the retina. They're very small, but they can become leaky from years of elevated blood sugar and diabetes. And so it can cause leaking and bleeding in the back of the eye, which obviously that never sounds good, but it can lead to blindness. And my whole area with that, where I get really passionate, is that people aren't being helped in the way that they need to help manage their blood sugar. Again, more from like a root cause way. Like, of course, yes, medications are needed, but my whole issue with that conversation is that people aren't always being given their options about how to look at diet and lifestyle first before they just are kind of like accept their quote unquote fate of having diabetes. I share this one story that sticks out recently. I had a woman who was on 3 different diabetes medications. And I said, okay, has anyone ever, talked to you about your diet and lifestyle? And she said, oh, no, I haven't gotten that far yet. And I was like, oh, yeah,
that should be step one.
That should be step one. And I did post about this on social media. And of course you get people that are like, bigger picture, there's like limitations and it's tough sometimes, but sure. I think that just needs to be part of the bigger picture. Is why is that not the first thing that people are being spoken about? Is how do you help balance that blood sugar and do it through diet and lifestyle so that you don't need to be on multiple meds just to keep things down to prevent you from having blindness, and of course it affects everywhere in the body. But I just, I get like very passionate about that topic because I mean, you can lose your vision on it. And it's something that's so preventable if people were just taught the correct things to do.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I'm a huge blood sugar advocate over here. And I feel like too, like part of that process is nobody is talking to the patients as their blood sugar is climbing year over year at their appointments until they actually reach that threshold in the conventional world where they're like, hey, you're diabetic now. Guess what? You get to go on metformin. Guess what? You get to go on a GLP-1. Guess what? Right? Like they wait until they trip over this line that now deems them as diabetic, and they've been kind of blindsided. And if somebody would have talked to them and like, if they historically look back and they could be like, oh my gosh, yeah, my blood sugar was above 90 5 years ago. And nobody said, hey, we might want to start considering that this could develop into something else. Here are the things that we can do diet and lifestyle wise to prevent something that can have pretty severe like outcomes if it goes uncontrolled.
Yeah, it really is. And I think people will say like, oh, like that won't happen to me or but when you say the word blindness, it's kind of like that's like the number one sense that people don't want to lose, right? Is their vision. And so I think that's where people really, they need to take it more seriously and not just like, oh, it's something I can just manage by taking this medication. It's like, no, it's still really, if it's not controlled, it can get bad. And I say that not to scare people, but kind of what you said is like, hey, we could do something about this way sooner. And even if you want to get real nerdy and say, well, can we go look at your fasting insulin first before, because that'll rise before the glucose. And I realize that that's not something everybody has access to, but we just can find this so much sooner than it really needs to be, where we're at the point of talking about somebody losing their vision from blood sugar.
Yeah, but I think too, like, it's unfortunate that doctors are just not including a fasting insulin as part of their yearly exam with the yearly labs that are being drawn. Like, it is such a red flag warning light long before your actual fasting glucose or your A1C will become elevated, because that fasting glucose is going to be just that point in time, right? You know that, I know that, but a lot of our clients, our patients and listeners may not understand that, like, fasting glucose tells us right here, right now, what your glucose is. It doesn't know what it is after you ate. It doesn't know what it is in the middle of the night. So we get that one point in time. Your A1C is going to be more of a snapshot of like, what have the last 3 months looked like? How has glucose been interacting with your hemoglobin? And so that gives us a little bit bigger of a window. But that fasting insulin, man, like, that is like, your insulin is trying to keep your blood sugar in check. And so it's taking oftentimes more and more insulin in order to keep that fasting glucose and that A1C at a good point. So if we would just check that fasting insulin, we could like help so many people. Yeah. And that's what Christina and I do. We check that fasting insulin. We want to see what it
check is. That. We want to know so we can help you way sooner.
Yep, exactly. So speaking of like helping things way sooner, what is like some of these aha moments or like things that like people might be recognizing as symptoms that are like more of this like whisper that, hey, there's something going on when it comes to the gut skin eye imbalance long before it becomes this full-blown chronic condition? What should people be looking out for?
Yeah, so so eyes, right? Of course, we'll start there, but dryness. So if you are having dry eyes, that's one thing to look at. Redness is another thing. So people who have kind of that chronic red eye and they can't seem to figure out why, that's can be pointing at inflammation, or also kind of like that dryness, and assuming that as far as like when it comes to the actual vision itself, but sometimes like fluctuating vision, of assuming that you've had everything checked and things are good. But these sometimes can be those little, I love that you said that term, little whispers of clues from elsewhere. And then same thing with the skin, like in the sense, yes, you might not have full blown like eczema or psoriasis or, rosacea. But even before that, if you are noticing like your skin just feels dry and dull, and it just doesn't have that nice like complexity that you're kind of looking for, those can be some signals as well, because the skin definitely reflects. It's like a signal from the body, what's going on underneath. And then for the gut, I mean, definitely if you're having bloating, often I feel like I talk to women all the time, not just women, men too, but a lot of like people struggling, with bloating. Again, some of that little reflux we were talking about, if you're just like, that's weird. And then the fluctuating bowels, I think, is a big one too. So it doesn't have to be anything crazy like extreme constipation or extreme diarrhea, but if you're in a place where things just are a little irregular, those can be some clues as to like, maybe there are some connections here. And if you have, because I see this often, this it's like the fluctuating bowels, something going on with their skin, their eyes are dry, and they have fatigue and brain fog. I feel like that is just like I see that so often. I talk to people all the time that have like that cluster of symptoms, and then that's when we go, okay, we got to look deeper.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but like living the lifestyle that a lot of people are living now, we're in 2026 and there's a lot more screen time. But what else in our environment is potentially contributing to things that are affecting our eye health and our gut health that is leading to all these different conditions that people are experiencing?
Yeah. So great question. One thing that immediately my first thing that came to mind, actually, because in the eye world, is makeup and beauty products is a big one. As we know that many products in general, but especially, here in the United States, because our products aren't regulated the way that they are in other other places like Europe. But so there can be a lot of endocrine disrupting chemicals in our beauty products. But then taking it a step further, sometimes people don't think about this, but products that you're putting directly on and around your eyes, a lot of them have a lot of chemicals in it that are not great. And so not great for those glands we were talking about, but also, for the eyes themselves. The eyes are and your skin are an area that you're absorbing all of these things into the body. And so especially if people are having the dry eye symptoms again, then and this one's tough because, people are like, oh, I want the best. I want the whatever brand name makeup product to make me have this great makeup. And I'm like, well, there are definitely more natural products and eye safe products that are out there that are not going to have all these extra chemicals that are disrupting hormones, but also, causing inflammation, causing just toxin exposure, affecting the eyes, things like that. They're definitely out there. I recommend them to my clients and I talk about this often, but I think people kind of forget about that makeup. And going a step further, you have to remove your makeup. Like like when people sleep in their makeup, that is like one of the worst things that you can do, especially if it's the toxic makeup, because it's just getting all absorbed in there. So for a message to all the ladies, even if you're so tired and you just want to go to bed, take that makeup off, make sure you're getting it all off, because that's definitely a source of some of these environmental toxins that we're exposed to.
And I will say too, for people who really struggle with washing their face because maybe you got too sleepy on the couch at night, what I recommend doing is when you finish dinner, go wash your face, get yourself ready for bed so that you don't have to like splash water on your face and like wake yourself up when you're like, no, I just want to go to sleep right now. Just do it earlier. There's no need to wait until right before you go to bed to do your skincare routine.
Exactly. I love that.
So what I also want to talk to you about is something that came up as you were telling me this. What role do our eyes play when it comes to circadian rhythm and sleep health?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So they play a huge role because that is, of course, how we're getting, the light into our eyes. And so when we talk about regulating our circadian rhythm, that is one big recommendation that I think pretty much all of us in this space talk to our clients about is, making sure you're getting outside, getting that morning sunlight exposed and in your eyes too. So, not wearing sunglasses when you go outside, but getting that morning exposure, because that helps with regulating our cortisol. When we'll see often people potentially have that cortisol dysregulation where either it's too low in the morning, we're not getting that response to have them wake up if they feel sluggish and tired in the morning, or the classic wired but tired if they're staring at screens too late before bed. That's when we see a lot of those issues that can really throw that off. And to that point with the screen time, we're supposed to have some blue light. So that is one thing I always like to clarify, that it's not all blue light is bad. Like you have to avoid it all. We do need some blue light, but again, in the morning and during the daytime. The problem becomes when it's nighttime and we're all staring at our screens. And that's where we really can run into the issues, because our eyes are viewing this blue light at a time that we're not supposed to be having that. And that, again, just kind of further dysregulates that circadian rhythm. And that's where we see people having issues falling asleep, staying asleep, or again, that sluggish wake up. So I do talk about and recommend wearing blue light glasses before bed, specifically, the dark amber red ones are ones that you can put on if you're someone who really needs to be on your phone. Like me, even like the nature of our work, right? What we do, we can be not the best, we have to be looking at our screen sometimes. So mine are over on my nightstand, actually over there, and I'll pop those on, over top. So if I really need to be on my phone, at least we can try to, avoid some of that blue light where we can, to kind of help the best we can with getting that circadian rhythm back on track.
So that brings up a point. What about the TV in the bedroom?
Yeah, that should not be there. I know that's a big source for people that they like to fall asleep with, the TV on, but same thing, just another area to have that light that your eyes are being exposed to. So really we should get phones out, or if you really need the blue light, but get the TVs out. You want to have that dark environment. In my house, we have red lights that we installed into like lower table lamps that will turn on in the evenings. So even as far as like the overhead lights that you have in your house, those can even kind of dysregulate, your circadian rhythm. So if at least an hour before bed, if you can get the little like red lights and put them into your lamps and have those on. And then that way you're not getting that like bright, especially like depending what type of lights that you have, but that bright light, and you can kind of start to help in that sense too. So my husband and I, we just, pop on our red light and kind of get our evening routine down. And I like to recommend that to my clients as well.
Mm-hmm. I am so sensitive to light when trying to sleep. Like we were at an Airbnb and there was a like smoke detector on the ceiling, kind of over in the corner on my side, but that green little light on there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I had to get up and get a towel from the bathroom to like put over my face. I'm like, I need to make sure I always travel with a sleep mask because the slightest bit of light is very disruptive to me in my sleep.
Yep, same. I don't travel anywhere without my sleep mask and my earplugs because I take my sleep pretty seriously. And I'm like, yeah, we cannot, if you never know you can't always control what the environment's going to be. So yeah, got to always pack those so that you're ready to go even with traveling.
Yep. So let's, kind of alluded to this, but I would love to hear, like, for the woman who is listening right now and they are reaching for the artificial tears or the concealer that maybe isn't have the clean ingredients in it, what are 3 steps that they could do today to start supporting their gut health that's also going to support their eye health?
Yeah. So let me see, because of course, when you were saying about the concealer, my brain went there first, to saying, okay, well, there's a lot of information out there on the internet about making swaps in that sense. And a little fun fact I like to give people as well, if you are suffering with dry eye, something easy that you can do is to get heat on the eyes, but specifically not even necessarily, because the thing people classically know is like a washcloth, like a heated washcloth, but they make little heat masks that you can put in the microwave and put over your eyes. And that helps to melt those little oil glands to help get the oils back into your tears. And it's something so easy that you can do. And here's the habit stacking that I like. Because you do it for about 10 minutes, if you just have that over your eyes, lay down, and then that's when you can do some of your breathing exercises to kind of help regulate your nervous system. But that's like, a 10-minute easy thing that you can do where you're supporting your eyes, you're supporting your nervous system. But that again, kind of is looking at more of like that root cause approach. And then to go just one step further, like, because you're asking, with the gut as well, the biggest thing I think is starting to look at your diet. And I'm sure we have people in all over. So you have the people who are still having like that standard American diet. And so that's of course the low hanging fruit. Like, hey, let's clean up that diet. Let's get a lot of whole foods in there, anti-inflammatory, omega-3s is amazing for eye health as well. But see if you can start working on that diet piece and then making sure you're getting a lot of different variety as far as your fiber and your different vegetables and things like that, because that's going to help those beneficial gut bacteria. Of course, the people that we tend to work with, we're at that phase where we're testing and we're giving specific recommendations. But like one of the most basic things that we talk about for everybody is those basic things like, hey, let's build up those beneficial good gut bacteria with the food that fuels it. And that's something that really everybody can do. And before you even get into the nitty gritties of supplements and testing and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we work very similar in that we are often focused on that food first before we even think about like, how do we need to supplement to support your diet and your lifestyle right now too. But food first, always.
Always.
Well, this was a really great conversation, Christina. Is there anything else that you want people to know when thinking about their eye health, skin health, and gut health and how they are all related?
Yeah, just again, my big message is that everything is connected. We should not be looking at the body as separate organs, we, for some reason in the conventional world, we have all of these different specialists now that specialize in different areas of the body, and people quite often get passed around from specialist to specialist, but nobody is looking, well, I shouldn't say nobody, that's what we do now, but people, people weren't looking at the bigger picture. And so the takeaway is you need to look at your skin, your eyes, your gut, but the whole body as one piece, and that they're all related. And if you have an issue in one area, it's not just that one thing, right? You have to look at everything else and look at you as a person and all the systems connected, because everything is together. It's one body.
I love that. How can people connect with you? How can they find you? And have you helped them with all of their eye, skin, and gut health issues?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at the Functional Eye Doc, and then my website is lookingbeyondhealth.com, and you can always reach out to me at Dr. Christina at lookingbeyondhealth.com.
Amazing. Everybody go give her a follow. She has great content on Instagram, and ask her all of your eye health questions. Thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Healthy Buzz. I hope this conversation has left you feeling seen, supported, and ready to take the next step in your health journey. Love what you heard? Make sure you subscribe to Healthy Buzz so you never miss an honest conversation. And if you found this valuable, please take a moment to leave a review. I truly appreciate it. For exclusive weekly tips and holistic strategies, be sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter. The link is in the show notes. Remember, this isn't just nutrition, it's permission to trust your body. I'll catch you on the next episode of Healthy Buzz.